Hello, welcome. I think we're live. I
All
tried
right.
something new today, and it looks like we're live. I'm only on YouTube today.
Okay.
I said forget Facebook.
That works for me.
Yeah. Mr. Rez is here. He says we're live. Yay. Cool. All right. Happy Saturday, everyone.
Yes. Happy Saturday.
Bro Farm Boy's here. He says we're very live. Yay. Yeah, exactly. What's Facebook?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't understand engagement on Facebook. I can't for the life of me wrap my head around it.
No.
I mean, Twitter, like, you do stuff and makes sense. Like, you talk to people, you follow. But I mean, like, Facebook, it's just like nothing happens. I don't know. I don't get it.
Right.
So
I think honestly, Facebook is like at this point the only thing I ever get a reaction to on Facebook is it could be like, like pictures of Sydney or something, but like
yeah.
Political stuff, that's pretty much it. I'm like, I don't like getting political, so it doesn't happen too often.
Right.
You know.
But I mean, I put the same stuff out usually that I put out on Twitter, and we just there's nothing there. So
Right.
I'm getting close to giving up on Facebook.
Yeah, I hear you there.
Probably just, I mean, I will keep it going, but it's like I don't think it's worth it to keep streaming live and using up the bandwidth.
No, it's not worth that effort.
So, all right, well, if you're ready, though, I should probably start recording. Okay, I think that'll do it. I hung out last night live with the Scarif guys, and have you listened to the Scarif podcast?
I have not.
It's good stuff. So they had a live show last night. I was hanging out with them, and
that's cool.
Pizza and Parsecs, what's up?
All right.
Is it Dave or Liv? I'm guessing Dave. All right. Dave indeed. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit the intro if you're ready to go.
I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's go.
All right. Let me know. I double checked. You should be able to hear all this, but let me know if you can't.
Okay.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Hello there. This is the From a Certain Point of View podcast, and this is episode 29. I am Josh.
I'm Adam.
And we're here once again to bring you some Star Wars news, our points of view, maybe a review here and there.
Yeah.
And first, we're going to chat about what we've been up to in Star Wars this week. So, Adam, what have you been up to?
Mostly just reading Alphabet Squadron this week. That is a really, really fun book, and I am loving that book so far. Getting very excited for Shadowfall next month. And we're a little over halfway through it now in the book club, and Alphabet Squadron, that is. And I think Shadowfall is going to be our next major book club book, since that comes out June 23rd, I believe. And in between then, I think I decided we're gonna sneak in the TIE Fighter comic series, which is an Alphabet Squadron tie-in. So, but I am loving Alphabet Squadron, and actually, I've said this a few times in the book club chat, but this is kind of what I wanted Aftermath to be when that trilogy came out.
Yeah,
this feels like what I wanted that trilogy to be. So I'm really loving Alphabet Squadron. So
does it feel a bit more connected to the universe than
there are so many mentions of projects of Operation Cinder and things like that,
yeah.
and I mean, I don't want to spoil a lot of the stuff in case people haven't read it, but there's some pretty cool cameos, and it's really, really good. Like it's top notch Star Wars novel. So
yes, I just finished chapter 1 last night, and
okay, don't
for
give
whatever,
up. Don't give up.
okay,
After chapter,
I'll be honest,
chapter 2 is going to get worse for you, and
yeah,
there's a lot of introductions and a lot of characters that you meet in chapters 1 and 2. Don't give up on it, because after chapter 3, it kicks into high gear. You're gonna love it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it took me like a couple nights to actually read chapter 1. Like I usually read right before I go to sleep. So
Right.
usually I'll like a half an hour. I'll read for half an hour, and I was just having some difficulty getting through that first chapter. And then I opened up to the second chapter, and it was like 45 minutes, and I was like, nope, not tonight.
Oh yeah. No, so chapter
Are
2
all
is
the
actually pretty long.
Are all the chapters that long?
They're all about. I'm actually not reading this one on Kindle, so I can't tell you like time wise.
Yeah,
but they're all probably about 20-30 pages, give or take.
Okay, all right.
So
well, I'll have to see if
I think chapter 2 is one of the longer ones, if I remember right. But they're all about 20 to 30 pages on average.
I'll see if I can up my reading game. I'm a huge fan of books that have quick chapters, and then but just because it makes you keep going and wanting to see what's happening next and everything. But I'll give it a go.
Yeah. I think you'll really like it. And like I said, just push through chapter 2, and then you'll be fine. So
yeah, will do.
So what have you been
Anything
up to?
else?
No, that honestly, that's about my Star Wars for this week. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a pretty light Star Wars week as well. I mean, the main thing was I continued watching season 1 of Rebels, like on episode 10, I think, right now, out of the 15 episodes of the first season. And it just reminded me how much I love that show. It's just, I love it. And, I love that it's more focused on just these central characters, and it kind of follows their story. And I really enjoy that team of rebels, and it feels like the original trilogy in a lot of ways, and I love that.
Yeah, I watched a couple the episodes of the first season of Clone Wars. I was trying to do my like complete watch through, and I think I've underestimated how long Clone Wars is with 7 seasons and all that.
It could be tough to get through, especially the first couple seasons, and and I think in Clone Wars, the difference is there's a lot of characters to cover, and sometimes you go into these separate stories. Like you'll have a whole arc about droids or something like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
thought about just doing some of the essential arcs, cutting it back a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. But Rebels, I feel like I'm engaged. I'm loving every episode.
I've only ever watched Rebels through all the way once, and I want to do that again. I'm getting the itch to watch Rebels now.
Yeah, it's really good, and I love the animation style as well.
Yeah,
in Rebels.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then I listened to the Resistance broadcast. I listened to their interview with Eunice. I forget what Eunice's last Huthart or something like that.
I forget
who was the stunt coordinator for Rise of Skywalker, and it was just a wonderful interview. It was just hilarious.
She gives a good interview.
Oh, it was amazing. If you haven't listened to that interview yet on the Resistance broadcast, check it out. It's well worth it, especially if you enjoyed the Skywalker Legacy documentary.
Yeah, she was actually one of my favorite parts of that whole documentary.
Yeah, she was a standout for sure.
I loved her and Adam Driver. They didn't like really show them going back and forth, but just the separate interviews where she's talking about how she's going to pull him out if he's not doing well enough, and then he's talking about how this is his character. The character comes first and all that. So
yeah, he's very protective.
I loved her energy in that, and I imagine she gives a good interview.
Her energy absolutely pours out in the interview, and she talks. Some of my favorite parts of the interview actually is when she talks about Adam Driver, because he's one of my favorite actors at this point. I mean, I've watched some of his other films as well, and I watched Marriage Story not too long ago on Netflix, and his performance is just amazing. He's just a tremendous actor, and when Eunice talks about Adam and his acting abilities and just how hard he works and everything, it was just, I love that, because we don't get to hear a lot from Adam Driver himself. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I think that's all I've been up to, and we also had a poll this week, and I can talk about the results of that poll. And this poll was about the Clone Wars. We've kind of now, of course, wrapped up Clone Wars for good, for now at least, and probably for good forever.
Yeah,
But
I
we
think for
had,
good forever, sadly.
yeah, sadly. Our question was, if you had to choose, which was your favorite episode of the Clone Wars final arc? We had Old Friends Not Forgotten,
Mm-hmm.
Phantom Apprentice, Shattered, and then Victory and Death. The winner of the poll was Phantom Apprentice at 41% of the vote, which I kind of expected. Close second was Shattered at 32%. Victory and Death at 22%, and Old Friends Not Forgotten at 5%. So, did you vote in this one, Adam?
Yeah, I did. I actually went with Shattered. I really
Shattered.
liked Shattered. I loved how it tied in with Order 66, and I loved everything that happened there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I went with Shattered as well. Anything tied to Order 66 just gets me in the feels every time, and I loved how they did that and tied it into what happened with Order 66. So I'm with you on that one.
Yep,
Yes.
nice. So
and I'm seeing in the chat that Mr. Rez was saying that Eunice was a great interview.
Yeah.
And Rural Farm Boy says Shattered was his pick too. So
that's 3 of us. So why don't we just executively make Shattered the winner then?
yeah.
Okay. So this week on the show, well, first of all, we are live on YouTube this week, and I want to give a shout out to everyone that is joining us here so far. We have Mr. Rez, Roar Farm Boy, Pizza and Parsecs, followers of the Force. So thanks for hanging out. This week on the show, we have we have news, which is pretty much all casting, unless I'm missing something for TV projects.
Mostly.
And then we move on to the newest episode of Disney Gallery, which is The Cast. That's the Mandalorian behind-the-scenes documentary. And finally, since Mark Hamill talked a little bit this week about him officially finally being done with playing Luke Skywalker, we wanted to take a look back on Luke and his career and his legacy and all of his contributions to what we know and love. So that is episode 29 in a nutshell. You ready for news, Josh?
Yeah, let's jump to our news segment.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
So I was very pleased to see our first piece of news here that once again is brought to you by Far, Far Away News. And luckily, season 2 of The Mandalorian was already in post-production prior to all the coronavirus shutdowns. So the good news is there is no delay for the release of The Mandalorian season 2. So that means we're getting The Mandalorian back in October. So I was worried that there might be a delay, but it's good to know that we'll have some Star Wars in October.
Yeah, it was good to get that confirmation. I actually wasn't really worried about it at all, seeing as how they already wrapped up filming and all that stuff. And, I figured that a lot of the other stuff could probably take place at home or remotely in whatever way that means. So I wasn't too worried about it. It's very nice to have that confirmed. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that they film and the way that they do post-production and everything on The Mandalorian really helps in this situation, because a lot of it is kind of done in a remote place, and everything.
Right.
Next up,
probably
we
lots
have
of lines being re-recorded in closets,
in,
right?
in closets and everything, which is okay to do, by the way. Next up, we have an exclusive scoop from Slash Film. They revealed that another character we're going to see in the second season of The Mandalorian, and spoiler warning here for this one, is Bo-Katan, and going to be played by Katie Sackhoff, who voiced Bo-Katan in the Clone Wars and Rebels, actually. And so, this is from Slash Film, pretty reputable. I think it makes a lot of sense to see, Bo-Katan. I don't think this isn't like officially confirmed from Lucasfilm or StarWars.com or anything.
No,
so
really none of these are. So
Right. So just take all that with a grain of salt, but it's possible. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Adam? First of all, what are your thoughts on the actress portraying?
Katie is great, and
Yeah.
the stuff that she's done in Star Wars already is great. I've seen her in Longmire, which is, I think it was on AMC originally, and then Netflix ended up picking it up for a couple seasons there. But she was in Longmire. She was great in that. So yeah, excited for Katie.
Yeah, agreed. One thing you mentioned, Adam, was
yes.
that some fan reactions to this news could be a little bit on the negative side, given that Ashley
not really so
Eckstein,
much,
Eckstein,
not really at all for Katie, but like you said, for
right.
It just kind of, so for me, it just, and still, not that I'm upset that Rosario got the role or anything like that. But it's a role given to the actress, the voice actress that played that character in Clone Wars, and I'm sure that, and Rebels actually, and I'm sure that, if I were Ashley Eckstein, I would maybe be a little upset, even though I know that Ashley wouldn't actually come out and say she's upset or actually act upset. But
right.
If it were me, I'd be a little peeved, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if I put myself in Ashley's shoes, I would definitely be a little upset by that, for sure. I think, my argument is that I think, Rosario Dawson kind of has the look and probably the physicality for the role that's going to be required of Ahsoka and everything. So that, that I think you have to go with the right person. And I think Katie Sackhoff definitely looks like Bo-Katan. I think she could totally pull it off. So I think it's all about getting the right person for the live action role. And hopefully, hopefully people will understand that.
Yeah, I see where you're going there, and like I still think that Rosario has a very good look for older Ahsoka. But I also, on the same token, think that Ashley could have pulled that off. She has been in live action. That's where she got her start, like she said. She's gonna have to be in makeup anyway, so there's easy ways to age her or whatever. I think it could have been done if they wanted to do it. So,
well, we will have to agree to disagree on this one, sir.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, my only other question about Bo-Katan is, what are you interested in seeing with this character being involved? Like, what do you think her involvement might be? What do you want to see out of this character in The Mandalorian?
Her involvement has to come down to the Darksaber.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where my mind goes to.
Yeah. So, I don't have any guesses about how she lost it or anything like that, or how Gideon ended up with it, but I think it has to deal with the Darksaber.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Moff Gideon got the Darksaber, and maybe her role is limited to a flashback of how that happened, or maybe she'll be presently in the show. I'm not sure, but
yeah, right.
That is Bo-Katan, and continuing the casting news, we have a leak, a rumor from Bespin Bulletin. I'm not familiar with them, but according to Bespin Bulletin in this leak, they are saying that Jimmy Smits will be returning to Cassian playing Bail Organa, and Alistair Petrie will be reprising his role as General Draven, who, and both of these actors, of course, appeared in Rogue One,
right.
And I think they both make a whole lot of sense to be in the show.
Yeah.
I think it makes perfect sense. So I'm hoping this is true, because I'd like to see Draven, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, all those characters being involved, with the rebellion. So, any thoughts on this news, or this potential news, I guess?
No, like you said, I'm just excited, especially for Jimmy Smits, if he would step into that role again. So,
yeah, no doubt. finally, we have one more bit of casting news. This one's for The Mandalorian, and this one comes from The Hollywood Reporter, so that one's a bit more reputable. And they're saying that Timothy Oliphant, or however you say his last name, will be joining The Mandalorian and will appear in season 2. His character in the story is currently unknown. So, any thoughts on this one, Adam?
I really like Timothy's stuff, and if I had to guess, I would be going with Cad Bane.
Oh, Cad. Oh, I could see that. Hmm. I could definitely see him in that role. I just
Yep.
recently
Remember, we
watched.
have that gunslinger that we're talking about, and I know
Yeah,
Timothy's been
yeah,
in Deadwood and done that type of stuff. So
yeah. And I just
I'm gonna go
watched
with
Once
Cad.
Upon a Time. I just watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again,
Okay, yeah.
and he was in that, and he was kind of a gunslinger, Western type role, and I think he could totally pull off that type of role. I think good bit of
Yeah.
casting.
Yeah, and
there for
Followers
that
of
one.
the Force kind of throws out my second guess on that gunslinger character. They say David says that Timothy as Cobb Vanth would be great, and could serve as the story of how he got Boba's armor, which is alluded to in the Aftermath trilogy, and 100%.
Ooh.
I actually when I saw that episode, that fifth episode of Mandalorian. We have at the end where we have those boots that walk up to Fennec Shand.
Yeah.
My two guesses. My first guess that I really wanted to see with that would have been Cobb Vanth, just because that's a character like David said that we got in Aftermath, and it's not a major character. I would love to be introduced to that character in a show like Mandalorian. I think that would fit. But yeah, I really don't want that to be Boba. I just want Boba to be dead. Which sounds terrible to say.
Yeah,
but I'd really be interested to see Cobb Vanth.
Yeah, I really love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah. But I do think
like
that Cad Bane would kind of be like very exciting to see in live action too.
Yeah, I love how they're bringing animated character. I've always wanted to see how can they bring animated characters into live action, and hopefully it'll translate well. Hopefully they'll pull it off. But even bringing characters from novels too into live action as well. So, I think there's a lot of potential
throws
to do
out
that.
a possibility, maybe Thrawn for Timothy Oliphant.
Ooh, yeah, I could see him playing Thrawn. I've always wanted to see a live action Thrawn as well.
Yeah.
Especially since Rebels.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So that's it for the news this week. And now we're heading to our review segment of the show. And we're going to talk about the Disney Gallery episode cast.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Okay, so the third episode of the Disney Gallery Mandalorian documentary was titled Cast, and this episode was kind of broken down into the I guess another big three that we have in Star Wars. We had Luke, Han, Leia, we had Rey, Finn, and Poe. Now we have Mandalorian, Cara Dune, and we have Greef Karga. So kind of broke it down into those three actors and those three characters, and it kicked off with Pedro Pascal talking about the Mandalorian and what it's all about. And, he mentioned that it's of course it's about like the special effects and the action and all that stuff, because, that makes Star Wars what it is. But more importantly, it's about characters. It's about relationships and also taking risks to achieve something new. So what do you think of these comments by Pedro, and kind of even thinking about maybe the risks they took with the show, or how they pulled off the characters? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they talked a lot about acting with Pedro in a mask, and that's always a risk, I think, and it's not a common one that you run across, and it's usually going to be in something like sci-fi fantasy like this. You don't often get characters that just stay in masks, and acting against that has to be very difficult.
Yeah.
Gina Carano talked about that, and I was actually very interested in Deborah Chow and how she said that a lot of his acting came down to moments that trying to keep things still, so that when there was movement, there was action, that it meant more, which was very interesting. And we talked. I remember when Mandalorian was coming out, and we talked so much about Pedro's just any little head movement, and I never really thought about the stillness of the scene around him and how that would add to that meaning. So I thought that was a really really cool little thing that I hadn't thought about before. But yeah, back to the risks. Just having that character in a mask like that is a big risk, because it's hard to translate that in acting, and it's hard for audiences to really latch onto a character like that when they can't see the facial expressions. I'm blank. Carl Weathers talked about acting with that, and how he had to listen to the voice even just to be able to kind of reciprocate the feelings that Pedro's putting out. So it was very, very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think a couple risks that came to my mind when I was watching that. One being the fact that Baby Yoda, basically, because I mean, obviously it turned into this phenomenon, but they didn't know if it was going to or not. It could have gone the other way. People, but the darn child was so adorable, and it's sitting behind me right now over my shoulder there. It just became something huge, but it could have gone the other way. I thought about just the fact that even in episode 2, the entire episode basically has the Mandalorian, like you said, who's covered in his face is covered in a mask, and then you had Jawas and Baby Yoda all carrying this episode.
Yeah.
And I think that's another risk, that the show kind of focuses on some of those ancillary characters, characters that don't typically get the spotlight, that type of thing. So yeah, definitely. And then you kind of touched on this, my next point here, about how do you portray emotions with a character that's wearing a mask? And it really comes down to, kind of like gestures, head movements, actions. And I noticed as I was watching, like, I felt like I really did connect to the Mandalorian, probably because of Pedro's performance when he was in there. And just some of those subtle head movements and gestures and things, I still felt like I was connecting with the character.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I remember the part where they showed some of Pedro's voiceover recording,
Mhm.
and the acting that he's putting into that, even though it's just his voice, that's another way that you're connecting with them emotionally. He's putting
Right.
that feeling into reading his lines, because he doesn't have, he can't rely on facial expressions to tell that story. He has to put it into his voice, which is kind of what Carl Weathers was talking about too.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. Next up, they kind of, the cast talked about a funny story about Pedro having to go to the hospital. And he was all like covered in blood and everything, because it was that
all in
scene
makeup,
where
right.
yeah, and because it was that scene where they IG he took off his helmet
Took
and
off the helmet after
everything
he got blown up. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I just thought that was hilarious. I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was a very funny story.
Yeah, and then
that
they
they
said
were talking
he
about.
came back and just jumped right back into the scene. And
Yeah, he's like a hockey
It
player.
reminded me of Lord of the Rings in the Two Towers, where Aragorn is tracking Pippin and Merry, and there's that scene where they come across the burnt bodies of the orcs, and
Yeah.
Viggo Mortensen Aragorn kicks the helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite behind the scenes stories of all time actually is that he actually when he kicks that helmet, he broke his toe.
He broke his toe, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he was supposed to kind of kick the helmet and scream, but he kicks the helmet, he falls down to his knees, and then he just lets out this scream because, I mean, it actually hurt.
Because he's actually hurt, yeah.
But it reminded me of the Pedro story, you know, where he actually had to go to the hospital. He's covered in makeup, and he comes back, and he actually, you know, he has 7 stitches in his nose, and he's
right.
still doing the scene, so.
Yeah, just awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point that one out. And then the next thing I wanted to bring up was kind of our 3 men in a Mando situation. So we had 3 men in the suit.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. You know, so we had, you know, of course we had Pedro in the suit a lot of the time, but then we had you know, kind of an actor that was more the, I don't know,
the gunslinger, more like the hand to hand, and then you had
martial arts, and then and then the one that was more like the gunslinger.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, Adam?
I thought that was interesting, and I think it was mentioned during the show. I don't think that this is my own thought, but it was almost like the 3 different sides of his personality. You know, almost where you had Mandalorian himself, Pedro, and then you had, you know, the action hero, and then you had the gunslinger aspect. So it was, and like I said, it might have been Gina that said something like that, but yeah, it's interesting to kind of get the. I honestly did not know that there was 3 different people under that suit. I imagined that there was a stunt double, but I didn't know that there was, you know, one.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard that there was somebody else in the suit some of the time, but I didn't realize that there were, you know, kind of 3 people that were bringing that role to life. Normally, I like to have the actual actor in there or whatever, the actual actor doing their stunts. I love that kind of stuff when they're able to do that. But so at first I was a little like put off by the whole idea, but when I watched this, I understood why they did it, and I love that these 3 people like brought this character to life in the way they did. And I feel like, you know, when I'm watching The Mandalorian, it makes sense. It's all very believable. I don't think about there being a few different people. You know, I just see the character. So so I like the way they did that. And then after talking about The Mandalorian, they started talking about Cara Dune, and of course played by Gina Carano. And you know, she kind of seems, and I could be wrong, but she seems to be very humble and maybe underestimates her abilities as an actor. But what are your thoughts on her performance in the show?
I wasn't familiar with much of Gina Carano before The Mandalorian, so this is kind of my introduction to her. But she is an incredible action hero, you know.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite parts of this episode was when they talked about how she'd had to just pick up Pedro and after, you know, during that standoff scene with Gideon and the stormtroopers, and how she just, there was no help there. She just like yanked him up like I do with my 5-year-old.
Takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, like I do with my 6-year-old daughter. She just rips Pedro up, and you know, I mean, he's not a small guy.
No.
But then he's also wearing, what, 20 or 30 pounds of armor or something like that. And, you know, she just lifts him up like nothing and then drags him away. So,
yeah. It's impressive.
I forget who it was. Someone else just said she's just, you know, this badass, awesome hero. And that's what she is. I loved her.
Yeah.
So
for sure, yeah, I think she did a great job.
That she was in the concept art before she was even cast.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
that was neat. Like it was like they had her in mind, basically.
Yeah, like that role was like made for her.
That was hers. Yeah,
right,
for sure. And then we moved on to our final character that they focused on in this episode, Grief Karga, played by Carl Weathers. And there were a couple interesting tidbits about this character that I didn't know. First of all, he was supposed to die in episode 3.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a Poe Dameron situation where Poe was supposed to die early on in The Force Awakens, and then they get the actor in there and they kind of realize, oh, you know, I think we need this guy. I think we need this person to play a bigger role, and they changed their mind. And he was also supposed to be an alien
Yeah.
character. So
Yeah,
did
under
you
a mask and makeup and all that,
did anything about this whole portion of the show stand out to you?
It was a good story. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with Carl's point about, you cast the actor so you want to have the face in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you had Pedro's face in there once. You have Nick Nolte, who wasn't in there at all. You think back to Star Wars in general, and you have James Earl Jones, who's never shown his face at all, ever in these movies.
That's true.
I don't know. So I disagree with that a bit, and I think the Carl Weathers voice for an alien would still be very interesting. But yeah.
I mean, I liked how it turned out. I like his role.
Here.
I like his role in the show, and I think he's another crucial element of what makes the Mandalorian what it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that was episode 3 of the Disney Gallery focused on the Mandalorian. Any final thoughts on this episode, Adam, or anything that I might have missed?
I don't think so, and I enjoyed this episode. Didn't quite pass up Legacy for me, but lots of fun stories, lots of fun anecdotes in this episode. Yeah,
and speaking of Legacy, I think that's a great segue and transition into our final segment of the show for today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the legacy of Luke Skywalker.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Earlier this week, in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Mark Hamill told us officially what we probably all knew, but maybe didn't want to hear. His time playing Luke Skywalker is apparently over. In his own words, here's what Mark said: "I'm full of gratitude for what it has given me in my career, but I don't want to be greedy. There are still so many more stories to tell, and so many great actors to tell them. They don't need me." I think we all knew going into episode 9, with that being the heralded end of the Skywalker saga, that any glimpse of Luke in that movie would probably be our last look at Hamill in that role. And barring any unforeseen voiceover cameos or things of that nature, that seems to be the case. So we figured this week, what better time to reflect on Mark Hamill, his contributions to Star Wars, and his legacy of Luke that he's left us overall. So I've pulled out a few main points here, and I think we can just kind of talk about these and riff on these for a bit. But one of the things that I have always been drawn to Mark Hamill about, and I think it's probably the same for a lot of fans, is that Mark is kind of the fan of this whole franchise, So as far as the actors go, original cast, I guess, he's kind of the fan. He just jumps into this stuff. He eats it up. In the Skywalker Saga documentary, I remember him just hanging around there. The stories about him hanging around in the 70s and 80s, and wanting to be in the creature shop and wanting to know about all the behind the scenes stuff. And even the interactions he shows us on Twitter, he's just really that guy that just he's the anti Harrison Ford of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I
Harrison just doesn't. I don't care.
Yeah, whatever. I dare say that Mark Hamill, I think of all the actors that have been in Star Wars, I think he cares about Star Wars the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I already mentioned the Skywalker Saga, but I just love seeing him in that because he is so vested in it, And he said a few times that this character isn't really his, and I wonder how much of that is really true. Like he doesn't own the character.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think feels that way. I think he's saying. I don't think he's truly saying what he feels. I'll say that.
Okay. But he's also, I think, gracious enough to know when to step aside, and I think that's what he's saying when he says stuff like that.
Yeah,
because Luke really is Mark, right? But anyway, I just want to go back to that Skywalker documentary because seeing him interact with Babu Frick and the set of I'm forgetting that. Kajimi.
Kajimi. Yeah.
Man, he just wants to be there, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome.
There was that mention of him, and he would want to hang out on set even when he wasn't. They weren't shooting scenes that were his. He would just want to be there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like I said, he's just the fan of the series, and that's always been endearing to me. But he hasn't, and we talked a little bit about his character of Luke already. He hasn't only just been Luke, though. You know, some people show up and do their role, and then that's about it. Mark has done other things for Star Wars, not even tied to the movies that he's in. You know, we think about Bulio in The Rise of Skywalker, where that was a voiceover of his that he did. But he's also in The Rise of Skywalker, so that makes sense. But then he actually showed up for Clone Wars. He did Darth Bane. He was Darth Bane's voice in season 6 of Clone Wars. He has contributed to Star Wars beyond just being Luke.
Yeah, I think he even played like one of the alien voices in Canto Bight in The Last Jedi.
I was wondering about that, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which would make sense. I was thinking about that scene as I was writing it, and I just couldn't confirm. So, and then followers of the Force, David also said that he narrated the 1980 Empire Strikes Back special effects film.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
He also did some of the other specials back then, including the Christmas special. And Pizza and Parsecs says that he's been a steward of the franchise and the fandom with it, which is actually, 100% a better way of saying what I've been trying to say. So, and then, so let's talk about a little bit about Luke Skywalker then. The legacy of that character is pretty much tied into the legacy of Star Wars overall. It starts with him. The New Hope doesn't, that's not the first thing you see, but you see your first glimpse of Luke is that farm boy and on Tatooine, and that stays with you. That stays with people that watch this movie. That's a legacy of Star Wars, and that's all tied around Mark Hamill. This is maybe a difficult question to answer, but what do you think makes Roar Farm Boy. Luke was also a farm boy. What do you think makes the role of Luke? What do you think that makes that Mark so much? And as much as he says so often that he, it's not his role, it really is. What do you think ties those two together so strongly? Is it just the time that he spent playing the role, coming back to it after so long? Is it something about him personally, being a fan and being invested into it? Is it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely his investment in that role, and you can just see how passionate he is about Luke Skywalker. I mean, he has very strong beliefs about who Luke is as a character. He knows the character inside and out, having played him, and we can probably get into a little bit more of that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think he just has a certain way of knowing what that character is.
Yeah. And why don't we just slide into that right now then? So what is the legacy of Luke's character then to you?
I mean, to me, Luke Skywalker is my favorite Star Wars character. I mean, he's one of my favorite heroes of all time, if not my favorite hero. He was the first hero that I was really introduced to as a kid, and I think he's a relatable character. He just starts out as this kind of farm boy, and he's like looking to the sky, wanting to leave where he is and look for something brighter. And I've always related to Luke. He of course he's a little whiny at first, sometimes we forget that, like in A New Hope and even a little bit in Empire, he's kind of not believing in what Yoda's trying to teach him. And we all start out that way, but by the time Return of the Jedi rolls around, this is what I love so much about Luke is he has become this Jedi Knight, and the confidence he has in himself and what he does at the end of Return of the Jedi, I think is what made me fall in love with Luke so much as a character, because he decides not to fight. He throws his lightsaber down. And he says, "No, I'm not going to fight you because I am not going to give into my anger and turn to the dark side." Um, so instead, he just throws his lightsaber down and um, faces death basically against the Emperor. So, I think he completely comes to embody what the Jedi are, using the Force for knowledge and defense, and not for attack. He becomes a true Jedi by the end of that film. Um, so yeah, I mean that's the legacy of Luke Skywalker to me. He's my favorite hero. He's my favorite character. Um, and I just love what he stands for and how he embodies being a Jedi, even into the Last Jedi, which we can disagree with, disagree about. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I'll echo some of that. Yeah, for me, Luke has always been about hope and optimism, and we can talk about the Last Jedi here as well.
hmm
Um, and he does come around to that in the Last Jedi. So I appreciate that for what that is. He has not been quiet about some of the feelings he had in that role, and I was that in the director and the Jedi. Is that where?
Yeah. I mean,
that
he
interview.
he
Okay.
was quoted as saying, "I fundamentally disagree with the choices that you've made about my character," and I can't fault him for that at all.
Yeah, right. And uh, I think the point that I want to make here, like so two things. Like I very much fall in line with Mark on that, on those sentiments. Fundamentally disagreeing with the direction of the character in the first 80% of that movie.
hmm
But what I wanted to mention here is not so much that, but it's more that Mark as a person had the grace and the wherewithal to still put his entire effort into that, even when he felt that way.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
exactly what I was gonna say.
don't know I could do that.
hmm
I've had issues even at work just this past week where I've been upset and ticked off,
hmm
and I just don't want to do it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I can't wait to get out of that seat and to do something else and to not be involved in that anymore.
hmm
And I don't know that I could do what he did, because he put in one of the performances of his career in that movie,
Yes.
even feeling the way he felt.
hmm
So I think that's the main point that I want to make with the whole Last Jedi thing is,
Definitely.
that while I do
And
agree with him, I can't respect him enough for putting that performance in and
right.
doing the work that he did.
Yeah, there's
And
two
Cam
things
says,
yeah, I was just gonna say there's
yeah,
two
Cam
things in the
says
chat I'm
that,
seeing right now.
yeah. So since I'll read Cam's and you can read David's. But Cam says again, shows what a great dude he is. Didn't agree with his character arc in TLJ, but he played his role 200%.
hmm Yeah, and so that's what I just absolutely agree with you that even though he fundamentally disagreed with these choices about his character, he put out what is, in my opinion, the best performance that he's ever done. Luke, his portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi, the acting was just amazing. I think he did a great job, um, and then as well as followers of the Force, he's a character that isn't without failure, and that's what makes him most human. For me, that's why I did like what we got out of Luke in The Last Jedi. I mean, he was my favorite character before The Last Jedi, and he was still my favorite during The Last Jedi because he faced failure. He isolated himself. A lot of times when we fail in life, we do that. We isolate. We want to run away from it, and then it takes a little nudge maybe from somebody to get us to where we need to be. And so I think that failure is very human, and I could relate to that myself. So I think that's what I liked about that. But I really like those two comments in the chat because they kind of summed up what I was going to say about, just Mark's ability to not only put aside his own kind of beliefs about the character to still nail the role, but also that I did get something out of his role in The Last Jedi, even though a lot of people felt a certain way. And I can't blame anybody for feeling that way, because I even thought, okay, him throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder, for me, that was a little too much. I didn't like that he did that. But eventually he comes around and does the most Jedi thing you could possibly do by, instead of showing up and fighting and using the Force to take out, AT-ATs and, and everything else, he projects himself, just acts in defense, to give the Resistance time to survive. So I think that was the most Jedi thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, and I think there's something else to be said for this, kind of along the same lines, where Mark felt the way he felt about Luke, and he still put the performance in that he did. But then, he came back for another movie, and not just came back, he was totally vested in that movie again. He wanted to be there so much, and I think fans can learn something from that. That we can have certain feelings about a certain episode or a certain movie, but we don't have to shut ourselves off from everything Star Wars after that, because I feel a lot of people have done that here and there. Maybe not a lot of people. I think that there are a few people that have done that, and I think you can use Mark as an example there. Where you can have those feelings on a certain level, but then you can still come back for the next movie, come back for the next TV show, and still be as excited as you were for the ones before that. So I think that that's an example that Mark sets for us, that we could follow.
Yeah, it's a testament to who he is as a person, so for sure.
Yeah. Do you think we're done? Do you think Mark is totally done? Do you think we'll never see him or hear him in a galaxy again?
I think I saw somewhere in the chat a Rocky Balboa quote along the lines of, it's not over till it's over type of thing. I'm not going to rule it out. I think, when you have Mark Hamill around, as long as he's still with us and everything, and God willing, I hope that's a long time. I think you have to use him in some way. I mean, and when we did that recasting episode of A New Hope, that's why I put him in as Yoda, using his voice acting talents.
Yeah.
But I think as Luke Skywalker, I mean, maybe if they did something animated or something with Luke, he could lend his voice to that. Or if there was, I don't know. I've always wanted to see a live action show of him, during his Jedi temple that he had in his Jedi Academy, and I don't know if we'll ever see that or not, but
right.
I'm never going to say never. I think there's always a chance that he could come back in some way.
Yeah. I go back to, with his role in Joker, and he said a number of years ago that he was most likely done with that. But he also did say, something like never say never, with coming back for another Arkham game or something. And there is another Arkham game coming around the corner at some point. So I don't know. I wonder if he would lend his voice for, something like I said, animation, but maybe even just like a Galaxy of Adventures or whatever that series is.
Right.
Right. Or, if we ever get that Rebels follow-up series.
Yeah.
Maybe he might appear in that.
You never know.
I don't know. Cam says a Bulio backstory. Let's not rule it out.
You never know.
So yeah, I don't know that he's. I do think that he's done as Luke. I don't think that we see Luke ever. I think that chapter's over.
I could see that.
But I always wonder if maybe we'll hear the voice again at some point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think we could. We'll have to wait and see.
Indeed, we'll have to wait.
Always
and see.
In motion is the future.
Difficult to see.
Mm-hmm.
The dark side clouds everything. Anyway, that's it for episode 29. You ready to wrap this up?
Let's do it.
I'm just glad you're here.
thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you hanging out. Thanks everyone in the chat. We mentioned some of them off the top at the beginning, but we'll roll call again. Mr. Rez, Royal Farm Boy, followers of the Force, Pizza and Parsecs, 2Med2, Radio Rebellion, and I think I got everybody. If I didn't, please don't unsubscribe. I tried. But thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you again next week. Remember to check us out on whatever, really, most podcatchers that you might use. We're on pretty much all the major ones here. And if you are listening on one such as iTunes or a similar one that allows reviews, drop us a review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us get out to more people, helps more listeners join in on what we're doing here, become a part of the community. Check out our website from a certain point of view.com. We have blog articles, links to all of our stuff. I did put out a new canon catch-up this week. This one was on Black Spire. So that one was fun. I really liked that book too. But yeah, check that out. That's on the website from a certain point of view.com. The socials are Twitter at certain POV pod, Facebook from a certain point of view. Discord server is the link for that is on the show notes and also on the website. That is also where we do our book club, and we're about halfway through Alphabet Squadron. So if you've read Alphabet Squadron, want to chat with us about Alphabet Squadron, join up. We'd love to have you. And then Anchor.fm is where our podcast episodes are hosted. You can check us out there. You can leave us a voicemail if you have a question or a comment, want to get your voice on the show. That's a great way to do it. So, Josh, you want to tell them what else you do on the internet and where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at JediJarJar17221722, or you can find me occasionally writing articles for StarWarsNewsNet.com.
Cool. And I'm on Twitter. That's where you can find me most of the time, the Gauze85. And I've also been writing for FarFarAwayNews.com. And I had an article out this past week about how we are currently living in the golden age of Star Wars. So kind of a positive-minded article. And if you want to check that out, head over to FarFarAwayNews.com.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that, Adam. It's a great time to be a Star Wars fan, and you did a really great article over there on that
Thank
one.
you.
So check it out, and and it's an exciting time to be in the Star Wars podcast game as well. And we thank you guys so much for being a part of that and hanging out with us and listening to our show and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you. And just remember that everything we told you today was true.
From a certain point of view. Cool.
Good job today, sir.
Yeah, you too. I see you in the chat too, Med too. I'll send you a DM. I will let you know. I have some things going on at home. I don't know if I'll be awake at 10 or 11 tonight, but if I am, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'll probably be still out like trying to get my pole to be clear instead of green. So
we can tell Josh
it's gonna be it's gonna be a rough day.
I'm putting up a massive swing set for my daughter today, so I don't know what's gonna happen with that.
That does sound trivia sounds fun though.
Trivia does sound. I did it last time with him. It was a lot of fun. So.
Cool.
Yeah. So thanks everyone in the chat for joining us. Anybody got anything exciting going on today before we wrap it up? Stop the recording, I think. I actually think the stream worked a little bit better without doing Facebook either.
That's good.
Oh, Followers of the Force has a Kevin Kiner interview coming
at the end of the month.
I think you said the 27th last night, if I remember right. So
that's awesome. I love Kevin Kiner, man, and even just now hearing more of his score in Rebels and everything too.
Radio Rebellion's got his live show coming up at 5. That's in 2 hours. So if you guys are free.
Nice.
And David says the 27th for his Kevin Kiner interview. That's exciting. I'll be checking that out.
Yeah, for sure.
Kevin Conner's a cool dude.
We need Kevin Kiner and some live action.
Yeah. I thought you
Not
were
as like an actor.
I thought you were gonna say we need him on the show.
Oh yeah, I mean, couldn't hurt.
No, it couldn't hurt. Cool.
Well, I think I'm gonna get back into my swamp of a backyard
Right.
and try to get some things done out there. But thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. Have
cool,
a great
David. That
weekend.
looks awesome. He's having a VFX supervisor for the OT on.
Yeah,
21st. That's awesome.
We'll be celebrating the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that next week.
Next week, so.
And then I think the week after that, we're gonna do another Psychology of episode, and I have to get that all lined up.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, I don't know if we ever want to go there again because we keep having this conversation about Luke Skywalker and The Last Jedi, but that'd be an interesting Psychology of too. Like, how did Luke get to be the Luke that he is in The Last Jedi? You know, just kind of looking at that.
No comment.
No comment. Fair enough.
No comment. No, I do think that that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm just being a smart aleck.
You just fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah. On an atomic level.
It's all good.
Yep. But
all right. Well, I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
You guys have
fun.
a good weekend.
Have fun with your bull.
Good luck with your swing set.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to this.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not looking forward to this.
Got a bad feeling about this.
I got a really bad feeling about this.
All right.
I will talk to you soon.
Later, Josh. I'm going to end the live stream here too. So thanks, chat, for hanging out. We will check you next week. And may the force be with you.